Blood tasted like copper and failure. Aisha pressed her back against the cold glass of a Gangnam boutique, her chest heaving and her dress clinging to her curves with a mix of sweat and pure terror. Through the blur of her tears, the neon lights of Seoul looked like a smeared painting. Her phone buzzed in her trembling hand. It was a message from Victor. "When I find you, you're dead. You hear me? Dead." This time, she knew he wasn't just talking. That morning, he had found her secret. The birth control pills she'd hidden in a tampon box behind the bathroom mirror. For 6 months, she had let him believe they were trying for a baby, watching him grow frustrated over every negative test. But the truth was, she couldn't bring a child into the hell he created. When he found those pills, his face changed. His fist had connected with her jaw before she could even explain. Then her ribs. Then his hands had closed around her throat, cutting off her air until the edges of her vision turned black. In a moment of survival, she had grabbed a wine bottle from the counter, smashed it over his head, and just ran. She didn't grab shoes. She didn't grab her passport. Now, stumbling through the midnight streets of Seoul in a torn dress and bare feet, her lungs burned, her split lip throbbed, and the bruises on her ribs screamed with every ragged breath. Behind her, the roar of an engine echoed off the buildings. Victor's car was getting closer. She turned a corner, her heart slamming against her ribs, and saw what looked like salvation in a tailored black suit. A man stood outside an upscale restaurant, flanked by 4 bodyguards who looked like they could break bones with their bare hands. This was Kang Hanyo. Everything about his posture screamed power, control, and danger. When their eyes met across the street, the world seemed to stop spinning for a heartbeat. His gaze was cold and calculating, but underneath that ice, there was something predatory. Something that recognized the raw desperation in her eyes. Aisha didn't think. She just ran. She crashed into his chest, her fingers clutching his expensive lapels like a lifeline. He was solid, warm, and smelled of wood smoke and authority. "Kiss me," she gasped, her voice breaking into a sob. "Right now, please." "He's coming. Just kiss me." One of the bodyguards moved forward to shove her away, but Haniel raised a hand, and the man froze instantly. Haniel's eyes flicked to the headlights of the Mercedes screeching around the corner, then back to Aisha's face. His jaw clenched as he took in her split lip, and the blooming bruise on her cheekbone. "Hold on," he growled. His hand slid into her hair, yanking her head back with a rough, possessive grip. Then his mouth crashed onto hers. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was brutal, electric, and a total claim. His other hand gripped her waist, pulling her flush against the hard planes of his body as camera flashes from nearby paparazzi exploded around them like small bombs. Victor's car screeched to a halt only 10 feet away. The smell of burning rubber filled the air. But Haniel didn't let go. If anything, his grip tightened, making it clear to the world, and to the monster watching from the car, that she was now under his protection. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Haniel's thumb traced her bleeding bottom lip. His eyes had gone dark and predatory, like he'd tasted something he had no intention of ever giving back. "Mine," he whispered. It wasn't a question. It was a law. Behind them, Victor's car door flew open with a violent crack. "Aisha," he roared. "Get away from him right now." Aisha went rigid, the old fear threatening to swallow her whole. She tried to turn, but Haniel's hand on her waist held her firmly in place. He shifted his weight, putting his massive frame between her and Victor, becoming a literal wall of protection. In that one desperate moment, one kiss had changed everything. She had just made herself the obsession of the most dangerous man in Seoul to escape a devil she already knew. Do you believe one kiss can save a life? Or did Aisha just jump from the frying pan into the fire? Lovies, my heart is racing. If you've ever felt like you had to make a desperate choice to survive, you know Aisha's pain. Don't leave her hanging in the dark. Hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications. Where are you watching from? Tell me in the comments. The interior of the SUV smelled like expensive leather and the faint, woodsy scent of Hanuel's cologne. As the door closed, the chaos of the street, the shouting, the camera flashes, and Victor's enraged voice was suddenly cut off, replaced by a heavy ringing silence. Aisha sat as far into the corner of the plush seat as she could, her bare feet tucked under her torn dress, her whole body shaking so hard she thought she might shatter. Haniel sat beside her, maintaining a possessive proximity that felt both like a shield and a cage. He didn't say a word as the vehicle glided through the streets of Seoul, his eyes fixed on his phone as he scrolled with a chilling indifference. "How do you know my name?" Aisha finally whispered, her voice sounding small and broken even to her own ears. Hanuel didn't look up, but his hand moved, resting on her bare thigh. It was warm, heavy, and undeniably proprietary. "I make it my business to know everything that enters my orbit," he said, his voice smooth like whiskey over ice. "Especially when it crashes into my chest begging for a kiss." They pulled up to a building that reached toward the skyline like a monument to wealth. All glass, steel, and untouchable power. As they ascended in the private elevator, Aisha caught her reflection in the polished metal. She looked like a ghost, hair matted, lips split, and eyes wide with a terror that hadn't quite faded. The penthouse was exactly what she expected. Minimalist, cold, and overlooking the Han River through floor-to-ceiling windows. But as Haniel led her inside, she noticed a strange warmth in the lighting, a lived-in quality that didn't match his icy exterior. Haniel shrugged off his suit jacket, tossing it over a chair and unbuttoning his collar to reveal a glimpse of ink on his collarbone. He moved through the space like a predator in his own territory, unhurried and in absolute control. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey, the amber liquid catching the light. "Take off the dress," he commanded, his back still turned to her. Aisha's heart stopped. The old reflex of fear kicked in, her hands flying to her chest. "Excuse me." He turned then, his eyes dark and unwavering. "I need to see your injuries," he said, settling into a leather chair with his legs spread. "Unless you prefer I do it for you." "Turn around," she pleaded. "No," he replied simply. "I've already kissed you. I've already claimed you in front of the world's media. There's no modesty left between us, Aisha." Her fingers trembled as she reached for the zipper. Shedding the dress felt like shedding her last layer of protection, leaving her exposed and vulnerable. She stood before him in just her underwear, her breath hitching in her throat. Haniel took a sharp, audible breath. His eyes, which had been so cold, now burned as they mapped the violence written on her skin. There were purple bruises on her ribs, yellow ones fading on her thighs, and the dark, finger-shaped marks on her throat where Victor had tried to squeeze the life out of her. It was a timeline of 3 years of hell, etched into her soft brown skin. He set his glass down with a slow, deliberate care that was more terrifying than a shout. His hands clenched on the armrests of his chair. "How long?" he asked, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous gravel. 3 years, she whispered, tears finally spilling over. Tonight was the worst, but it wasn't the first. Hanuel stood slowly, as if a sudden movement might break her. He crossed the marble floor silently and stopped just inches away. He didn't grab her. Instead, his fingers traced a bruise on her rib cage with a touch that was feather-light, almost reverent. "You're not defective," he said, his voice rough with an emotion she couldn't quite name. "You're not broken. And you're certainly not any of the things he called you." He cupped her face, his thumb brushing her bottom lip where the blood had dried. "You're under my protection now," he whispered, his eyes searching hers. "And in my world no one touches what belongs to me." Aisha looked up at him. This beautiful, dangerous man who had saved her on a whim. She was safe for now, in this golden cage high above the city. But as his thumb traced her jaw, she realized that while Victor had wanted to break her, Haniel wanted to own her. "What's the catch?" she asked, her voice steadying. Haniel's smile was slow and predatory. "The catch is that the world needs to believe you are mine. Public appearances, events, the media, we maintain the illusion." "And in return?" "In return," he said, his grip on her waist tightening just a fraction, "Victor will never touch you again. You get safety, you get my name, and you get the time to find yourself again." He leaned down, his forehead resting against hers. "But remember, Aisha, I don't lose. And I never, ever let go." Would you trade your freedom for total protection? Or is a golden cage still just a prison? Lovies, my heart is breaking for Aisha. Seeing those marks on her skin, it's a reminder of why she had to run. But is Haniel really her hero, Or just a different kind of danger? We're just getting started on this journey of healing and power. If you want to see Aisha find her strength and see Hanuel tear Victor's world apart, you have to hit that subscribe button right now. Don't let their story end here. Comment protect if you're rooting for her safety. The morning air in Seoul was crisp, but inside Hanuel's private underground facility, the atmosphere was heavy with the scent of gun oil and cold ambition. Aisha stood in the center of the shooting range, wearing a simple black tracksuit that Hanuel had provided. Her hands were shaking so much she had to hide them in her sleeves. For 3 years she had been the target. Now Hanuel was telling her it was time to become the hunter. I can't do this, Hanuel, she whispered, looking at the heavy black handgun sitting on the table like a sleeping predator. I've never even held a kitchen knife against him. How am I supposed to use that? Hanuel walked up behind her. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket today, just a black tactical shirt that hugged the muscles of his shoulders. He didn't say you can do it or offer empty words of comfort. Instead, he stepped into her space, his chest pressing against her back. The heat from his body was the only thing keeping her from collapsing. Victor didn't just hurt your body, Aisha, Hanuel growled, his voice vibrating against her ear. He stole your power. He made you believe that being soft was a weakness. I'm here to show you that even a rose has thorns. He reached around her, his large, steady hands covering her trembling ones. He guided her fingers toward the weapon. The metal was cold, but Hanuel's touch was fire. As he helped her lift the gun, his arms locked around hers, forming a human shield. Breathe, he commanded. Stop thinking about the pain he gave you. Think about the anger. That heat in your chest? That's not fear. That's fire. Use it. Aisha closed her eyes for a second. She thought about the bathroom floor. She thought about the birth control pills scattered like broken promises. She thought about the way she had to beg a stranger for a kiss just to survive the night. When she opened her eyes, the target down the range didn't look like a piece of paper anymore. It looked like the man who tried to break her. Squeeze the trigger, Hanuel whispered, his grip tightening on her hands, steadying her aim. Don't pull it. Invite it. Bang! The recoil jolted through her arms, sending a shockwave to her heart. The sound was deafening, but for the first time in years, Aisha didn't flinch. She saw the hole in the paper. Not quite the bullseye, but a hit nonetheless. Again, Hanuel said. His body was still pressed against hers, his heart beating a steady, calm rhythm against her shoulder blades. It was a strange contrast. His presence was dangerous, yet he was the only person who had ever made her feel safe enough to be dangerous herself. They spent hours like that. Every time she faltered, he was there to catch her. Every time her mind drifted back to the warehouse or the bruises, he brought her back to the present with a sharp command or a firm touch. As they took a break, Aisha leaned against the cold wall, wiping sweat from her forehead. Hanuel watched her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Why are you doing this? She asked. Most men like you want a woman who sits still and looks pretty. You're teaching me how to kill. Hanuel stepped closer, trapping her between the wall and his body. He reached out, his thumb tracing the fading bruise on her neck, the one Victor had left. I don't want a doll, Aisha, he said, his voice dropping to a low, possessive rumble. I want a queen. And a queen in my world needs to know how to defend her throne. Besides. He leaned down, his lips brushing her temple. I want to see what happens when the girl who ran finally decides to stand her ground. The air between them changed. It wasn't just about protection anymore. There was a pull, a magnetic, terrifying attraction that made her want to lean into him and run away all at once. Just then, the heavy steel door of the range swung open. Minho, Hanuel's right-hand man, stepped in with a look of pure disgust. Boss, we have a problem, Minho said, ignoring Aisha completely. Victor is making moves. He's talking to the elders. He's claiming you kidnapped his wife. If we don't handle this legally, the board will strip your position. Aisha's heart plummeted. The legal way usually meant returning the stolen property to its owner. She looked at Hanuel, her eyes pleading. Hanuel didn't even look at Minho. He kept his eyes on Aisha, his hand sliding into her hair to hold her gaze. Let them talk, he said coldly. Nobody takes what belongs to the dragon. And Aisha? She isn't a wife anymore. She's an empire. Underscore 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 underscore. Do you think Aisha is finally finding her strength? Or is she just becoming a weapon for Haniel to use? Lovies, I'm shaking just thinking about that tension. Aisha is finally learning to fight back, but the shadows of the past are closing in. Victor isn't giving up, and now Hanuel's own people are turning against her. If you want to see Aisha become the queen she was meant to be and watch Victor get what he deserves, you need to subscribe right now. Don't leave Aisha alone in this fight. Comment fire if you believe she has what it takes to survive. The grand ballroom of the Shilla Hotel was a sea of shimmering silk, expensive champagne, and whispers that cut sharper than glass. This was the Lion's Den, the heart of Seoul's high society. Everyone who was anyone was there, and they were all waiting for one thing: to see if the rumors about the dragon and his mystery woman were true. Inside the dressing room, Aisha stared at her reflection. She wore a floor-length gown the color of midnight, with a high slit that showed just enough skin to be dangerous. The dress was silk, hugging her body like a second skin, but to Aisha, it felt like armor. For the first time, the bruises on her neck were covered by a dazzling diamond choker. A gift from Haniel, that felt more like a collar of protection. You look like you're going to a funeral. A deep voice rumbled from the doorway. Aisha turned. Haniel stood there in a custom-tailored tuxedo, looking every bit the king of the city. He walked toward her, his eyes dark and unreadable. He reached out, his fingers grazing the diamonds at her throat. I'm terrified, Haniel, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. These people, they'll see right through me. They'll see a girl who ran away barefoot and bleeding. Haniel tilted her chin up, forcing her to look him in the eye. Let them look. When we walk through those doors, you aren't a victim. You are the woman I chose. If they disrespect you, they challenge me. And nobody challenges me twice. He offered his arm, and Aisha took a deep breath, placing her hand on his sleeve. As the double doors to the ballroom swung open, the music seemed to die down for a split second. The flashbulbs were blinding, a repeat of that night on the street, but this time, Aisha didn't flinch. She kept her head high, walking with the grace Haniel had spent the last week demanding from her. The whispers started immediately. Is that her? The one from the video? She's beautiful, but look at who she's with. They were halfway across the room when the crowd parted like a wound opening up. Standing there, a glass of bourbon in his hand and a sneer on his face, was Victor. Aisha's heart stopped. Her hand instinctively tightened on Haniel's arm. Victor looked groomed and wealthy, but his eyes were full of the same fermented rage that had haunted her dreams for 3 years. Well, well, Victor said, his voice loud enough for the surrounding elite to hear. I didn't know the great Kong Haniel was into picking up street trash. Aisha, honey, did you tell him you're only good for one thing? Or did you skip the part where you're a defective wife who can't even give a man a child? A gasp rippled through the room. Aisha felt the blood drain from her face. The old shame, the failure Victor had drilled into her head, threatened to pull her under. She felt small, exposed and worthless. But Haniel didn't move. He didn't even look angry. He just looked bored. Victor, Haniel said, his voice calm but carrying to every corner of the room. I noticed you've been busy talking to the board about legal property. It's a shame you spent so much time talking and so little time checking the screens. Haniel snapped his fingers. Suddenly, the large digital displays surrounding the ballroom, usually showing art or stock prices, flickered and changed. Images began to scroll. Not of Aisha, but of Victor. There were hospital records, police reports that had been paid off, and high-definition security footage of Victor striking a woman in an elevator 2 years ago. The room went deathly silent. Victor's face turned a sickly shade of gray. In my world, Haniel continued, stepping closer to Victor until he was towering over him. We don't discard what's valuable. We discard the trash that tries to ruin it. You didn't lose a wife, Victor. You lost your life. By tomorrow morning, your assets will be frozen, and your reputation will be in the dirt where you belong. Haniel turned back to Aisha, his expression softening just a fraction. He leaned in, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. You were never the problem, Aisha. He was just too small to handle your fire. Then, right there in front of the cameras and the stunned elite, Haniel kissed her. It wasn't a desperate plea for help this time. It was a public claim. It was a promise. Victor let out a strangled cry of rage and tried to lunge forward, but Haniel's security intercepted him before he could even get close. As Victor was dragged out of the gala, kicking and screaming like the monster he was, Aisha finally let out the breath she'd been holding for 3 years. She looked at Haniel, and for the first time, she didn't just see a savior. She saw a partner. But as the crowd began to applaud, she saw Minho watching them from the shadows, his face full of a darkness that suggested this victory was only the beginning of a much larger war. Did you see the look on Victor's face? There is nothing more satisfying than seeing a bully get exposed in front of the whole world. Lovies, I am literally screaming. Haniel really did that for her. He didn't just protect her. He gave her her dignity back. But we all know Victor isn't going to go away quietly, and Minho is looking more and more like a snake in the grass. Are you Team Haniel? Or do you think he's playing a deeper game? If you want to see what happens when the golden cage starts to feel a little too tight, you must hit that subscribe button right now. Where are you watching from? Drop a queen in the comments if you're proud of Aisha for standing her ground. The heavy double doors of the penthouse slammed shut with a bang that echoed off the marble floors. Outside, the world was still buzzing about the scandal at the gala, but inside, the air was thick with a different kind of tension. Aisha didn't even wait for Haniel to take off his coat. She whirled around, her eyes blazing with a fire that was no longer about fear, but pure unadulterated rage. How could you do that? She demanded, her voice shaking. How could you just put my life, my pain, on those screens for everyone to see like it was some kind of entertainment? Haniel paused, his hand halfway through loosening his tie. He looked at her, his expression as calm and immovable as a mountain. I won, Aisha. Victor is ruined. The city knows exactly what he is. Isn't that what you wanted? To be free of him. I wanted to be free, yes. Aisha stepped into his space, ignoring the way his height usually intimidated her. But I wanted to be the one to tell my story. You took my trauma, you packaged it into a slideshow, and you used it as a weapon without even asking me. You didn't protect me, Haniel. You used me to show everyone how powerful you are. He stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. I saved you from a man who would have crawled over your dead body to keep his reputation. I gave you my name, my home, and my protection. In my world, we don't wait for permission to strike. We crush the enemy before they can breathe. But I'm not your enemy, Aisha cried, tears of frustration pricking her eyes. And I'm not your soldier. For 3 years, Victor took away my voice. He told me when to speak, what to wear, and how to feel. I came to you because I thought you were different. But here you are, deciding for me again. If I don't have a say in my own life, then this penthouse is just a bigger version of the room Victor locked me in. The silence that followed was deafening. You could hear the distant hum of the soul traffic far below, but in that room, time seemed to stand still. Haniel looked at her, really looked at her. He saw the way she was standing her ground even though she was trembling. He saw that she wasn't just a girl he'd rescued. She was a woman demanding her humanity back. He took a slow breath and did something Aisha never expected. He sat down. He slumped into the leather sofa, looking for a moment like a man who carried the weight of the entire city on his shoulders. My father didn't ask for permission either, he said quietly, his voice devoid of its usual steel. He took what he wanted. He broke what he couldn't control. I learned very young that if you aren't the one holding the leash, you're the one wearing the collar. I thought that by controlling everything around you, I was keeping you safe. Aisha's anger softened just a little. She walked over and sat on the coffee table in front of him, forcing him to meet her eyes. Protection without respect is just another form of control, Haniol. I don't want to be yours like a car or a building. I want to be your partner. I want you to ask me. Hanuel reached out, his hand hovering near her face before he stopped himself, actually asking for space. Aisha nodded, and he let his fingers graze her cheek. I've never had a partner, he admitted, his voice a low rumble. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to let someone else have the wheel. You start by listening, Aisha whispered. You start by seeing me as a person, not a project. He looked at her for a long time, his predatory gaze softening into something more vulnerable, something more human. Okay, he said softly. Next time, we do it your way. I promise. It was a small victory, but to Aisha, it felt bigger than the gala. For the first time, she felt like the floor beneath her feet was solid. But just as she felt a spark of hope, she saw Haniol's phone light up on the table. A message from Minho. The board is calling an emergency meeting. They don't like the partner idea. They want her gone. The war wasn't over. It was just moving inside the house. Do you think Haniol can really change, or is he just telling Aisha what she wants to hear? Lovies, this one hit me right in the heart. Standing up for yourself when you've been silenced for so long is the hardest thing in the world. Aisha is a warrior. But now Haniol's own empire is turning against them because he dared to treat her like an equal. Are they going to stand together, or will the pressure tear them apart? Hit that subscribe button right now if you believe Aisha deserves to be heard. Comment voice if you've ever had to stand up for yourself. The marble bathroom of the penthouse was silent, save for the sound of Aisha's shaky breathing. On the edge of the vanity lay a small plastic stick. She stared at it as if it were a bomb about to go off. 2 pink lines. For 3 years, Victor had used his words like venom, injecting them into her soul every single day. You're useless, Aisha. You're broken. You can't even do the one thing a woman is supposed to do. He had made her believe she was barren, a defective wife. He used her supposed infertility as an excuse to hurt her more, telling her she didn't deserve a family because she couldn't provide one. But the stick didn't lie. She wasn't the problem. He was. Aisha sank to the floor, her back against the cold tile. Her hand instinctively went to her stomach. There was a life growing inside her. A piece of her that was finally, miraculously whole. But instead of joy, a wave of pure, cold terror washed over her. What kind of life could she give a child in this world of shadows? Haniol was a dragon, a man with enemies at every corner. Victor was still out there, lurking in the dark like a wounded animal. And then there was the board. The people who already wanted her gone. I can't, she whispered to the empty room, her voice cracking. I'm not ready to be responsible for someone else's safety when I can barely handle my own. She quickly hid the test at the bottom of the trash, covering it with tissues. She couldn't tell Haniol. Not yet. She needed to know if he wanted a partner or if a child would just be another possession for his empire. She walked out into the living area, trying to keep her face neutral, but Haniol was already there, standing by the window. He turned as she entered, his sharp eyes immediately scanning her face. He was too observant. It was a gift and a curse. You're pale, he said, walking toward her. Did the meeting with the lawyers exhaust you? I'm used to it, Hanul. It's been a long week, she lied, avoiding his gaze. He stopped in front of her, his presence filling the room. He didn't push her for the truth, but he didn't move away either. Instead, he reached out and took her hands in his. His palms were large and warm, a stark contrast to the icy fear she felt inside. Minho told me about the board's threats, he said softly. They think you're a liability. They think you make me weak. Aisha looked up at him, her heart hammering. Doi. Make you weak. Hanuel pulled her closer, his arms wrapping around her waist in that possessive way she was starting to crave. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch surprisingly gentle. They don't understand, he whispered. They think power is about how many people fear you. But since you crashed into my life, I've realized that real power is having something worth protecting. You aren't my weakness, Aisha. You're the reason I bother to keep the world at bay. He leaned down, resting his forehead against hers. I know you're scared. I know you're still healing from the hell he put you through. But I want you to listen to me. Whatever comes next, whether it's the board, whether it's Victor, or whether it's something we haven't even seen yet, we handle it together. You aren't alone anymore. Aisha closed her eyes, a single tear escaping. He was saying all the right things, but the secret in her stomach felt like a stone, heavy and cold. She wanted to tell him. She wanted to feel his hand on her belly and hear him say that their child would be safe. But the fear was a powerful ghost. If she told him, the stakes became infinite. If she told him, she wasn't just a woman under protection. She was the carrier of his legacy. Together, she echoed, her voice barely audible. She leaned her head against his chest, listening to the steady thrum of his heart. For a moment, she allowed herself to believe him. She allowed herself to feel the warmth of the golden cage. But as she looked out at the Han River, the dark water reflecting the city lights, she knew that secrets have a way of coming to light. And in Haniel's world, secrets usually came with a price. Can you imagine the shock? After years of being told you're broken, you find out you're carrying a miracle, but you're too terrified to share the news. Lovies, my heart is actually breaking for Aisha. She's caught between a miracle and a nightmare. She wants to trust Haniel, but the trauma of her past is telling her to run. What would you do? Would you tell the dragon his heir is on the way? Or would you keep it a secret to protect the baby? This story is getting so intense. If you are rooting for Aisha and her little miracle, you have to subscribe right now. Don't leave her alone in this. Comment miracle below to show her some love. Trust is a fragile thing, especially when you've spent years being lied to. Aisha was finally starting to breathe, finally starting to believe that Haniel was different. But in the world of the dragon, the air is always poisoned. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon. Haniel was away at a meeting with the board, and the penthouse felt unusually quiet. Aisha was in the kitchen, sipping ginger tea to soothe the morning sickness. She was still hiding when Minho walked in. He didn't have his usual stoic expression. He looked concerned, pitying. He walked over to the marble island and slid a manila envelope toward her. I shouldn't be showing you this, Minho whispered, his voice low and urgent. But I've seen what Victor did to you. I can't let it happen again, even if it means betraying my boss. Aisha's heart began to thud against her ribs. What is this, Minho? The reason Hanel kept you, he said. The deal he made with the board and Victor's lawyers. Aisha pulled out the papers. Her eyes blurred as she read the words. It was a transfer agreement. It stated that in exchange for $1,000,000 and the withdrawal of all legal charges against Haniel's company, Aisha would be returned to her legal husband's custody within 30 days. At the bottom of the page was a signature that made her stomach drop. It was Haniel's bold, elegant handwriting. No, Aisha breathed, the paper fluttering from her numb fingers. He told me I was his partner. He said we would handle everything together. He's a businessman, Aisha, Minho said, sounding genuinely sorry. To him, you were a high-value asset used to humiliate a rival. Now that the spectacle is over, you're just a liability he's selling back for a profit. The world turned cold. Every kiss, every protective touch, every word of comfort felt like a slap in the face. She wasn't a queen. She was a paycheck. And now, she wasn't just losing her freedom. She was losing the father of the child she was carrying. I have to go, she gasped, her survival instincts kicking in. I can't be here when he gets back. The back elevator is clear for 5 minutes, Minho said, checking his watch. Go. Now. Aisha didn't grab a coat. She didn't grab her jewelry. She just grabbed her bag and ran. She felt like the girl in Gangnam all over again, barely holding it together, hunted and alone. But as she reached the private garage, the elevator doors opened, and there he was. Haniel stood there looking exhausted, his tie loosened. When he saw her face, streaked with tears and wide with terror, he stepped forward instantly. Aisha? What's wrong? Why are you down here? Don't touch me, she screamed, backing away. I saw the papers, Haniel. $1,000,000? Is that all I'm worth to you? You were going to sell me back to that monster. Haniel froze, his eyes darting to the envelope in her hand. What papers? Aisha, I don't know what you're talking about. I would never. Stop lying, she sobbed. Your signature is right there. You used me. Aisha, listen to me, he said, his voice rising in desperation as he reached for her. I've been in meetings all day fighting to keep you. Someone is setting this up. It's a forgery. Suddenly, the lights in the garage flickered and died. The hum of the building's ventilation cut out, leaving them in a terrifying pitch-black silence. Clang. The sound of heavy boots echoed from the stairwell. Haniol. Aisha whispered, her anger instantly replaced by a paralyzing fear. Get behind me, Haniol growled. The vulnerability was gone. The dragon was back. He pulled a handgun from his waistband, his eyes scanning the darkness. Red laser dots began to dance across the concrete walls. A van with tinted windows roared into the garage, tires screaming. Before Haniol could fire, the side door slid open, and a flashbang grenade detonated. The world exploded in white light and a high-pitched ringing. Aisha fell to her knees, clutching her stomach. Through the blur, she saw men in tactical gear swarming the area. She saw Haniol fighting like a demon, throwing off two men twice his size, his eyes fixed on her. Run, Aisha! Run, he roared. But it was too late. A heavy hand grabbed her by the hair, yanking her up. She looked into the face of the man holding her, and her blood turned to ice. It was Victor. He looked disheveled, crazed, and triumphant. He pressed a cloth over her mouth, the sweet, chemical smell of chloroform filling her lungs. I told you, Victor hissed into her ear as the world began to fade. You belong to me, dead or alive. The last thing Aisha saw before the darkness took her was Haniol being pinned down by three men, his hand reaching out for her, his voice a broken, muffled scream of her name. Is Haniol telling the truth about the forgery? Or is he just the world's best liar? And what will Victor do now that he has her back? Lovies, I am literally shaking. To be betrayed by the one person you finally trusted. It's a pain I wouldn't wish on anyone. And now, with the baby involved, the stakes are higher than ever. Aisha is back in the hands of a madman, and Haniol is down. Is this the end of their story? If you want to see Haniol go full dragon, to get his woman back, and if you're praying for Aisha's safety, you have to subscribe right now. Don't leave her in that warehouse. Comment save her below if your heart is breaking right now. The world came back in flashes of cold gray and the smell of rotting wood. Aisha groaned, her head spinning from the lingering effects of the chloroform. She tried to move her hands, but they were bound tightly to a rusted metal chair. Her ankles were tied too. She wasn't in the penthouse anymore. She was in an old, abandoned warehouse near the docks of Incheon. The sound of the Han River was replaced by the eerie creaking of heavy chains, and the distant honking of cargo ships. Finally, you're awake. A voice sneered from the shadows. Victor stepped into the light of a single flickering bulb. He looked unhinged. His expensive suit was wrinkled, and his hair was a mess. In his right hand he flipped a pocket knife, the small blade catching the light with a deadly glint. Do you know how much you've cost me, Aisha? He walked a slow circle around her, the blade clicking against the metal of her chair. My company, my reputation, my dignity, all because you decided to play house with that gangster. He's 10 times the man you'll ever be, Victor, Aisha spat, though her heart was hammering against her ribs so hard it hurt. Victor's face twisted in rage. He lunged forward, pressing the cold tip of the knife against the side of her neck, right over the diamond choker Haniol had given her. You think he's coming for you? He's probably signing those papers right now, glad to be rid of the drama you brought into his life. You're nothing but a used-up toy to men like us. Aisha felt the sharp sting of the blade. A tiny bead of blood trickled down her skin. She thought of the life growing inside her. The miracle that Victor had told her was impossible. She couldn't die here. Not like this. She had to buy time. She had to use the only weapon she had left, a lie. Wait, she gasped, her voice cracking. Victor, stop. There's something you don't know. Something I was too scared to tell you before. Victor paused, the knife still biting into her skin. What? I'm pregnant, she whispered, forcing a sob to escape her throat. She looked him dead in the eyes, making her voice sound small and desperate. It's yours, Victor. All those years you said I was the problem. You were wrong. I'm carrying your heir. If you kill me, you kill the only legacy you have left." The silence in the warehouse was absolute. Victor's eyes widened. For a second, the madness in them flickered into something like greedy triumph. "My child," he breathed. "A son." "Yes," Aisha lied, her stomach churning with disgust. "But I can't have a healthy baby if I'm terrified. Please put the knife down." Victor stepped back, a sick smile spreading across his face. "I knew it. I knew I wasn't the defective one." He tucked the knife away, reaching out to touch her stomach. Aisha flinched, her skin crawling at his touch. "We'll leave the country. We'll start over. I'll raise him to be just like." Boom! The heavy steel doors of the warehouse didn't just open. They were blown off their hinges. The sound was like a thunderclap. Through the dust and debris, a figure emerged. It was Haniel, but not the polished businessman Aisha knew. He was covered in blood, most of it clearly not his own. His white shirt was torn, his knuckles were shredded, and his eyes were glowing with a feral, terrifying light. He looked like an avenging angel coming straight out of hell. "Get your hands off her," Haniel growled. The sound was low, vibrating through the floorboards like an earthquake. Victor scrambled to pull his knife back out, grabbing Aisha's hair and pulling her head back. "Stay back. She's carrying my son. If you take one more step, I'll end them both." Haniel didn't stop. He walked forward with a slow, deadly grace, ignoring the two mercenaries who rushed him from the side. He took them down in seconds, brutal, efficient strikes that sounded like breaking dry wood. He didn't even look at them. His eyes were locked on Aisha's. "I don't care about the money, Victor," Haniel said, his voice eerily calm. "I don't care about the board. I don't even care about my own life. I will give you everything I own. I will sign every piece of property over to you right now. Just let her go." Aisha's breath caught. He was willing to lose his entire empire, the thing he had spent his whole life building, just for her. "You're lying," Victor screamed, his hands shaking. "Check your phone," Haniel said, stopping 10 feet away. "My lawyers just sent the transfer. It's all yours. The buildings, the ships, the accounts. All of it. Just give her me." In that moment, Aisha realized the truth. Minho had lied. The papers were fake. Haniel wasn't selling her. He was buying her freedom with his own life's work. Victor looked down at his phone for one split second, his greed finally outweighing his rage. That was the only window Haniel needed. Would you give up everything you worked for to save the person you love, even if they doubted you? Lovies, I am crying as I write this. Haniel just proved that Aisha is worth more than his entire empire. He's standing there, covered in blood, ready to lose it all just to hold her again. But Victor is still holding that knife, and the danger isn't over yet. Will they make it out of that warehouse alive? You have to hit that subscribe button right. Don't leave Aisha and Haniel in the dark. Comment loyalty if you knew Haniel was the real deal all along. The tension in the warehouse was so thick it felt like it could snap at any second. Victor was distracted, his eyes glued to the screen of his phone, mesmerized by the digital transfer of Haniel's empire. He was already counting the money, already building a future on a foundation of theft and blood. He had forgotten one thing. Aisha wasn't the trembling girl she was 3 years ago. She had spent the last week with the dragon. She had learned how to use the fire. Haniel stood perfectly still, his eyes sending a silent message to Aisha. Now, as Victor leaned in to gloat, his face inches from hers, Aisha didn't pull away. She leaned in, then suddenly slammed her forehead into his nose with a sickening crack. Victor roared in pain, clutching his face, his grip on the knife loosening for just a heartbeat. That was all she needed. Despite her bound hands, Aisha lunged forward, using the weight of her entire body to tackle him. They crashed to the dirty floor. In the struggle, she grabbed his wrist, twisting it with a strength she didn't know she possessed until the knife fell. She snatched the blade, and as Victor reached for her throat, she buried the knife deep into his shoulder. Victor screamed, a sound of pure, pathetic agony. He rolled away, clutching his bleeding arm. the tough man act vanishing the moment he felt his own blood. "Don't you ever touch me again," Aisha gasped, her hair wild, her eyes burning with a justice 3 years in the making. Before Victor could even crawl away, the warehouse erupted. Haniel's men, who had been waiting for his signal, swarmed through the shattered doors and windows. The sound of gunfire and shouting filled the air, but Aisha only had eyes for one person. Haniel was there in an instant. He didn't stop to celebrate. He didn't even look at the pathetic man groveling on the floor. He dropped to his knees beside Aisha, his hands trembling as he sliced through her zip-tie restraints with a tactical blade. "Aisha," he choked out, his voice thick with an emotion he had tried so hard to hide. "I've got you. I've got you." He pulled her into his arms, crushing her against his chest. Aisha buried her face in his neck, sobbing as the adrenaline finally left her body. She was shaking, her skin cold and covered in warehouse dust, but the warmth of his body felt like home. Haniel stood up, lifting her effortlessly into his arms. He carried her past the chaos, past the mercenaries being handcuffed, and past the warehouse of nightmares. He didn't look back once. "Is it true?" he whispered as he tucked her into the back of his armored car, his eyes searching hers with a desperate hope. "What you told him? About the baby?" Aisha looked at him, her heart aching. "I had to lie to him, Hanu. I had to tell him it was his to save my life. To save our life." The ride to the hospital was a blur of blue lights and Haniel's hand never leaving hers. Once they were settled in a private wing, a doctor came in to run tests. The silence in the room was heavy as they waited. Finally, the doctor looked up from the chart. "The baby is fine, Ms. Aisha. A bit of stress, but the heartbeat is strong. You're about 7 weeks along." Haniel sat on the edge of the bed, his face pale. He looked at Aisha, his eyes searching for the truth he was too afraid to ask for. "Haniel," Aisha said, reaching for his hand, "Victor lied to me for 3 years. He told me I was the reason we couldn't have children. But the truth is, he was the one who couldn't. This baby? There is no doubt. He's yours. He's ours." A single tear rolled down Haniel's cheek, the first time Aisha had ever seen the dragon cry. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead against her stomach, his hand trembling as he touched the spot where their future was growing. "He'll never know fear," Haniel promised, his voice a low, fierce vow. "I will burn this city to the ground before I let anyone hurt either of you again." Aisha ran her fingers through his messy hair. She had run from a monster and found a king. He wasn't perfect, and his world was dangerous, but for the first time in her life, she wasn't just surviving. She was being loved. "Can we just take a moment?" Aisha didn't wait to be rescued. She took that knife and claimed her own freedom. That is the energy we are bringing into this year. Lovies, I am literally crying. To see her stand up to her abuser, and then find out that her miracle baby is safe. It's everything. Haniel is ready to give up his whole world for her. And now they have a little life to protect. But the wedding is next, and you know a Mafia wedding never goes perfectly. Are you ready for the grand finale? If you've been through a struggle and came out stronger like Aisha, you have to subscribe right now. Don't leave this family. Comment on it if you loved seeing Aisha save herself. The aftermath of the warehouse wasn't just about healing wounds, it was about total erasure. Haniel didn't just want Victor gone. He wanted him to cease to exist in the world they inhabited. While Aisha rested in the penthouse, surrounded by the best doctors and a security detail that rivaled a president's, Haniel went to work. Within 48 hours, Victor's world crumbled. Haniel used his influence to freeze every offshore account Victor owned. The evidence of his years of abuse, combined with the attempted kidnapping and the illegal mercenaries, was handed over to the authorities. Because Victor was an expat, Haniel ensured his visa was revoked and he was escorted to the airport. Not by police, but by Haniel's own men. He was deported back to a country where Haniel's associates were already waiting at the gate. Victor didn't leave with his dignity or his wealth. He left with nothing but the clothes on his back and the fear that he would never be safe again. The dragon had cleaned house. Even Minho, who had tried to manipulate Aisha with forged documents, was dealt with quietly and removed from the inner circle. The board was silenced. The message was clear. Aisha was the crown jewel of the Kong Empire, and she was untouchable. 3 months later, the air in Seoul was soft with the scent of spring blossoms. Aisha stood on the balcony of the penthouse, her hand resting on her stomach, which was now showing a soft, beautiful curve. She wore a silk robe, watching the sun dip below the Han River. "You're thinking too loud again," a familiar voice rumbled. Haniel stepped onto the balcony, looking relaxed in a simple white linen shirt. He stood behind her, his arms wrapping around her, his hands resting over hers on her belly. "I was just thinking about that night," Aisha whispered. "The night I ran to you. I was so terrified. I thought I was jumping into another nightmare." "And now?" Haniel asked, his lips brushing the shell of her ear. "Now, I feel like I finally have a home. Not just a house, but a home." Haniel slowly turned her around to face him. His eyes, once so cold and predatory, were now filled with a warmth that only she could see. He took a deep breath and, for the first time in his life, let his guard completely drop. He dropped to one knee. Aisha's breath hitched. In his hand was a ring, a diamond as clear and bright as the stars over the river. "Aisha," he began, his voice slightly rough with emotion. "Our beginning was messy. It was desperate. Some people would call it crazy. But crazy is the only foundation I trust because it's the only thing that's real. You saved me from becoming the monster my father was. You gave me a reason to be a man worth following." He looked up at her, his heart in his eyes. "Will you marry me? Will you be the queen to my empire, and the mother to our son?" "Yes," Aisha sobbed, pulling him up to his feet. 1,000 times yes. The wedding was the event of the century. It wasn't held in a stuffy hotel, but in a private garden overlooking the water. Aisha walked down the aisle not as a victim, but as a goddess in white lace. There were no cameras, no paparazzi, just the two of them and the family they were building. The story truly peaked a few months later, in the quiet, sterile light of a luxury hospital suite. Hanuel sat on the edge of the bed, his face pale and eyes wide with wonder. In his massive tattooed arms, he held a tiny bundle wrapped in a blue blanket. Their son Taejun had Aisha's golden skin and Hanuel's dark, intense eyes. He was small, but he was screaming his lungs out. "He's got your temper," Aisha whispered from the bed, exhausted but glowing with a peace she had never known. Hanuel looked down at the tiny baby boy, who had finally quieted down, his little fingers wrapping around Hanuel's thumb. A single tear fell from the dragon's eye onto the baby's blanket. "He'll never know fear," Hanuel vowed, his voice thick with a father's love. "He'll never know what it feels like to be hunted. He'll only know love, Aisha. I promise you. Only love." Aisha reached out, taking both their hands in hers. Sometimes, salvation comes from the most unexpected places. Sometimes, it looks like a dangerous man in a tailored suit. And sometimes, if you're brave enough to take a gamble, it becomes a legacy that lasts forever. Can we get some hearts in the comments for baby Taejun? He is the true king of this story. Lovies, my eyes are literally blurred with tears. Seeing Aisha go from running barefoot in the street to holding her son in a palace of love, it's the most beautiful transformation. This is proof that no matter how dark your past is, your future can be brighter than the Seoul skyline. I am so proud of you for following this journey with me. If this story touched your heart, you have to hit that subscribe button right now. Don't let this be the end. We have so many more stories to tell. Where are you watching from? Drop your country and a forever in the comments if you're happy for Aisha and Hanu. I love you guys so much. See you in the next one.